What are the single best qualities you look for in a product designer?
I specifically look at, I think it speaks volumes.
This is Will Wu. He's the CTO of Match Group and former VP of product at Snap. He was responsible for shipping some of Snap's most successful features, including the Discover page, chat feature, and Snap Games.
When you are creating a novel product, something that's truly innovative and new, simplicity is paramount towards making it easy to use and easy to grok.
What would you say is the biggest mistake founders make when hiring product teams?
Not getting rid of poor culture fits fast enough.
How does product culture go bad?
Again, I can only speak to my experience.
Will, I am so excited for this. I heard so many good things from many different people, but especially the incredibly good-looking Jack Brody. So thank you first so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really a privilege to be here.
It's very, very kind of you, but I wanted to start with your entry into tech first. I like a bit of context. So how did you first get interested in tech and product? Let's start there.
Okay, so we'll go way back. I was very lucky to grow up in a household just surrounded by tech and science. My dad was an electrical engineer working in the semiconductor business in Silicon Valley. My mom was a PhD in chemistry. So growing up, my dad would always bring home the latest computer gadgets. And actually, for whatever reason, I was just always so curious about how these computers and technology worked. So much to his chagrin, I would like tear them apart. I would get out my tool set and like start unscrewing everything and literally tear apart these computers. And then I would never put them back together, which just like drove him insane. But I just grew up around computers, and I had a really formative experience when I was around 12 years old. So sort of starting when I was 12 and going through my early teenage years, where I discovered on my computer on the internet what's called IRC. Do you know what IRC is?
No, I don't, but please keep going.
Okay, all right. So IRC stands for Internet Relay Chat, and it is essentially, I think it was invented in the late 80s, but it's essentially the first ever form of internet chat rooms. So as a 12-year-old kid, I would log on to IRC in my childhood bedroom every single night, literally, and connect with strangers online. And it sounds like a little bit weird, but I met some of the most brilliant people you could possibly imagine, because if you think about the types of people that are on IRC, and this is in the early 2000s, I can only imagine there were these like middle-aged computer scientists who had literally invented computers and the internet and everything. So they mentored me, and I learned from these strangers on the internet. I literally have no idea who they are. I learned from them just so much about computers and technology. I learned about cybersecurity and cryptography and computer networking and video encoding. And I one of my parents' favorite stories to tell is that when I was 13 years old, I went out on Craigslist and I bought a used satellite dish. And I was like taking guidance, mentorship from the people that I was talking to online. And I ended up taking this used satellite dish, crawling up onto the roof of my parents' home, and literally drilling holes into the roof to mount this satellite dish. And then I figured out how to point it at a TV provider's satellite up in the sky. And then I ran the cable into the back of my computer to see if I could decrypt the signal. And it was so technology was like my playground growing up. I was just constantly exploring different facets of what was possible. And it was just like out of a pure intellectual curiosity to understand how technology and computers worked, because it's just magical to me. It's like, how is it possible that we've created these devices that can just do so many things?
Okay, so we have this like innate love. I love that in terms of climbing onto the roof. Also terrified for health and safety reasons. Your parents must be going, my word, he needs to find some more friends. But I'm kidding. So my question is, we have this innate love of product and technology at such a young age. I was told I had to ask about that, and then I was told I had to ask how you came to Snap. What's that story?
So basically, I think the first half of my life was really thinking about myself as a technologist, as an engineer. I saw my father as a role model, and he was an electrical engineer, so that's what I ended up studying. And then I had gone to school in electrical engineering and ended up going to grad school in computer science. And I had dropped out of grad school to start a company with some amazingly brilliant people that I met there. And the company was actually also about online connection. I think this formative experience that I had meeting all these strangers online when I was a kid really helped me understand the impact that online connection can have. And so I started this company. We were building a group messaging app, which was sort of the hot thing to do in Silicon Valley at that time. One day, a mentor of mine walked into my shared co-working space with Evan, the co-founder and CEO of Snapchat at the time. And this was in late 2013. So Snapchat was still a startup. It was already growing to be very popular. I was already an avid user. My mentor was just like, "Hey, Will, this is Evan." And at first I had no idea who he was. And then I quickly realized that he was the CEO of Snapchat. I got really excited because I was an avid user. And he and I just had a really good conversation. So we ended up going to lunch together. And I remember we were getting to know each other, telling stories. And I started telling him the story of how, and again, this makes me look like a kind of weirdo, but for the original iPhone, I remember I was so excited about the launch of the original iPhone that I got all my friends together and we all camped out in line at the Singular Wireless store for 26 straight hours. And we were first in line at the store to get the original iPhone. And I remember telling Evan that story and he got really excited because he loves the iPhone. So we sort of high-fived across the table. In that moment, he was like, "I have the perfect job for you." And later that day, I got a job offer in my email and it said product designer as the job title. And up until that point, I'd always thought about myself as an engineer, as a technologist. And I looked at this job offer, it said product designer. And I was like, what is a product designer? I literally had no idea what a product designer was. So I tried to Google it to understand, but I still didn't really grasp it. But I'm so appreciative to Evan for helping me to see myself as a product person, because up until that point, I'd just seen myself as an engineer, but then he saw what I was doing. He saw what I was building. He saw the way that I thought, my passion for products like the iPhone. And he helped me sort of see myself in a new light.
I told you this is like a chat, which is why the schedule can be a little bit misleading. But everyone always says Evan is this kind of product visionary. You've worked with him on product for many years. I think it was like 9 years in the end. Yeah, 9 years and 2 months, according to LinkedIn. So 9. What makes him so good at product, Will?
Evan has got an unbelievable product instinct. Just so quick at understanding social interactions between humans, understanding what makes a beautiful design. He's got really strong values when it comes to product. I mean, he's instilled the way that he sees the world, the values that he has into the company, into Snapchat. And he's a really amazing storyteller. He's an amazing communicator. I think part of being good at product is communicating your ideas and your vision. And he is I consider him like a lifelong friend of mine. And he's just a very inspiring product thinker. He's brilliant.
You worked on and kind of were central to many different elements of Snap, which is so loved today. If we start on Discover, what are the biggest lessons you have from being so central to Discover?
I think one of the biggest lessons from Discover was that it's really important to understand the traffic patterns of how people are using your app. Because we had spent more than a year building Discover, designing it painstakingly, and creating the vision for it, or pursuing the vision that we had for it. And then we launched it, and it was sort of hidden off in the corner of Snapchat, like the way that the app is laid out is like at the very right of Snapchat, essentially. And we found that ironically, it was actually pretty hard to discover for our users, for our Snapchatters. And so it was a pretty intense launch because, we built up all this hype around it, and a lot of the media partners that we had were really excited. And then we launched it and people weren't discovering it. So then what we ended up doing was a very small design tweak. We moved Discover one screen to the left, essentially, to be on the same screen as where you see your friends' stories. And that completely changed the fate of Discover. It made it so easy to, again, discover. And it really helped me understand the importance of thinking through the ways that people are using your app or your product today, and thinking through how to gracefully expand your product feature set by wedging additional functionality into the right portions of your user interface, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. I love the challenge of discovering discover. The meta problem there is quite hilarious, to be honest. Another element that you worked on, which is crucial as well, is the gaming platform, which I think a lot of people don't actually recognize. I heard about trips to Australia. We can get into that later. But what are the biggest lessons from working on Snap's gaming platform?
Building that Snap Games is what it was called, was one of the most valuable experiences I've ever had. I had a lot of lessons from it. I got to meet some incredible people. I got to see that the game developer community is very global and vast and diverse and so creative. So I think some of the best product thinkers actually come from game design. I think for me, Snap Games, the biggest lesson was actually a very personal learning and sort of building the confidence and the courage in myself to overcome challenges, as sort of corny as that sounds. I was in my 20s and I had never before managed a team. I'd never before acquired different companies in pursuit of a vision. And I remember that actually the launch of Snap Games was quite chaotic and I think one of the most stressful periods of my life, where we ended up launching it with this sort of grand keynote on stage where it was the first ever keynote for Snap, and I was talking in front of thousands of really important people, and public speaking really terrifies me. And I had never actually before spoken to a reporter, a journalist, so my first time ever speaking to a reporter was actually speaking to a whole room full of really prestigious reporters, and they were all sort of like cross-examining me, and it was just all of this was happening right at the same time while we were simultaneously trying to launch this crazy new product on this like unproven technology in partnership with 5 different game developers from different continents and time zones around the world. It was just, I wasn't eating or sleeping very well, but it gave me a lot of confidence actually, because at the end of the day, I persevered through it. And after getting through that, I'm like, wow, I can get through a lot more than I really thought. So I think it just gave me more courage to challenge myself, and it made me sort of start to realize that imposter syndrome, which is always something that I've felt my entire life and I still feel to this day, it can be a good thing. It always used to terrify me, but now I'm almost like I intentionally put myself into these imposter syndrome like uncomfortable positions, because it just means that I'm pushing myself to learn and to grow.
I totally agree with you. I've always felt it, having not been educated and being a venture investor. I think I must be the only one. But my question to you is, I think often people can feel imposter syndrome when they're thinking about art versus science in product in particular. They like to lean on data and science because of a fear of their own conviction or courage, or lack of courage sometimes, as awful as that sounds. And I always think, is product art or science? How would you answer that question? If you were to put a number on it, where would you place them?
I believe that product is equal parts art and equal parts science. In fact, actually, I'm just sort of beginning to build a new team here at Match Group called ASL, and it has 2 meanings, but one of the meanings is Art and Science Lab, which reflects my belief that the most innovative and the best products sort of happen at the intersection of artistic disciplines and sort of scientific or technology disciplines. And it's sort of like a dance between the two. You need to bring folks from multiple different perspectives and backgrounds and trains of thoughts together to sort of swarm around solving problems for people in order to create really innovative products. As a product leader, I think in addition to making sure that the team has art and science backgrounds, I also think you need to take a sometimes artistic, sort of intuition and instinct driven approach, and sometimes scientific data driven approach when you're actually developing a product and growing a product over time. So sometimes you have to lead with your instinct. When you're taking a product from 0 to 1, no amount of data or market research is going to tell you exactly whether it's going to work. You have to take a leap of faith. But then oftentimes when you're iterating beyond that, you can use data to inform your instinct and to inform which direction you want to go.
Speaking of that intersection and the subconscious that you mentioned there, you've spoken to me before about kind of the human-centered design importance and focus. And I didn't really have an idea what you meant, to be honest, Will. So before we dive in, what is human-centered design?
At its core, human-centric design is just keeping your end users, humans, at the forefront of your mind through every single step of the product development journey, from the very early stages of ideation and need finding and building empathy for your customer, all the way through development, prototyping, showing prototypes to users, getting their feedback, iterating, launching, etc. It's really just keeping the human at the forefront.
Where does human-centered design most get lost, Will?
I think it can get lost if you, again, sort of lean on data too much. Because oftentimes, a signal that you're seeing in the data might tell you to do one thing, but if you don't stop and sort of think about how whatever feature change that is might impact your end users, how they feel, or how it might impact the problems that you're solving for them, you can lose sight of your customer at the end of the day and end up going down a path that might have long-term detrimental consequences.
Are there products that you think of today that do this brilliantly and that do this badly to bring this to life for us?
The Apple Watch is a fantastic example of a product that I assume was made with a human-centric design approach. Because if you think about it, I mean, I feel like human-centric design is all about identifying problems that humans are having, your users, your customers are having, and figuring out how to solve them through a blend of art and technology. And the Apple Watch is an incredible product. I mean, look at how ubiquitous it's become over the last few years. And elderly people, for example, it's a problem that in old age, if you have a nasty fall, it can have long-term detrimental health consequences. So it's incredible that the Apple Watch can use its accelerometers and motion sensors and all that kind of stuff to actually detect these falls and notify emergency services. I mean, even looking at I don't know if you saw the most recent announcement for the Apple Watch, I think it's called Double Tap, where they saw that there's a problem with using the Apple Watch today. Every Apple Watch, as we've known it up until this point, if you can't actually tap on the screen to hit like a button on the watch, if you're holding a cup of coffee or if you're like walking the dog or something like that with a leash. So they invented this feature through a blend of intuition and instinct and art and science that lets you double tap your fingers on the same hand, where you're wearing the watch, and it actually hits the primary action on the watch. So it's another example of just how this human-centric design is looking at the problems that humans have, your users have, and figuring out how you can solve them.
Okay, who does this shit?
I mean, I don't know if it's fair for me to really bash on anyone. I think the first thing that comes to mind is, and I should caveat that I actually understand that this is a phenomenal product, but for me as a user, as a consumer, using Concur, do you know Concur?
Of course I know Concur. It's terrible. Terrible.
Okay, I'm glad it's not just me. I mean, it's serving a different type of customer. So it's really good for an enterprise. I mean, it's like an enterprise SaaS product. And they can have a really successful product because they're solving the right needs for an enterprise customer, another company that they're selling to. But I don't know if that product was designed from the ground up with the end user in mind.
No, it's like Bill.com. I always think with these companies, like, do they have anyone in product? I think
it's just a different, it's like a different product mindset and philosophy. It's like enterprise product is very different from consumer product, which is, where I normally focus my energy, where, I think the human-centric design approach really matters.
So when we actually say about the human-centric design approach, when you break it down for me today, if I were to say, I am a founder listening to you and I want to do it, what is your approach and how can I do it, Will?
Identifying your target user, the people that you want the most to use your product, building empathy for them through whatever means necessary, really. I mean, you can get really scrappy if you're an early founder entrepreneur. You can go talk to people on the street.
Dude, what questions do you ask to uncover user needs? Because it's hard.
For me, the first thing that comes to mind is, I'm at Match Group thinking about how to continue to spark online connection around the world. And what's your approach to dating? If you were to have you tried online dating before? If you were to try online dating for the first time, which apps would you consider? If you've gone through online dating already, like what are some of the struggles that you have? What are some of the challenges? Tell me your problems. You basically just want to hear about what problems they have so that you can, so someone might say that, oh, getting started with online dating is actually really challenging. There's tons of different apps out there that you can choose from. How do you know how to make a dating profile? It's just incredibly challenging. It's like a little awkward to figure out how to represent yourself with photos and some text online in front of, potentially millions of strangers in a romantic setting. So just thinking, hearing, listening to their problems, formalizing those problems, writing them down, and then bringing together really smart, creative people from different backgrounds, that art and science background, to really think about how to solve those problems.
Well, you said about the kind of creation of profiles. Is simple always better when it comes to product design? I look at kind of creating profiles today. Some are simple processes, some are not. Is simple always better in product design?
It's not always better in my experience, but I do think that when you are creating a novel product that people don't yet understand, something that's truly innovative and new, I do think that simplicity is paramount towards making it easy to use and easy to grok. And I think about the original iPhone, for example. It was very simple. Actually, they used user interface design patterns like skeuomorphic iconography to help ground people's understanding in real physical analogies. And then over time, iPhones have gotten much more sophisticated. They've added in feature after feature after feature. The reason that can work is because if you start simple, then you have a core product. If you're lucky enough to find product market fit, then you've got a simple core product that people can easily pick up and understand. And then once you've sort of captured their attention, once you've found that product market fit, then you can take them on this journey over time where you layer in complexity. You can really push the boundaries of what the design language can do in order to introduce new features and new complexity that solves the user's problems in totally new ways.
Can I ask, how do you prevent feature creep? It's so easy over time just to add more, and then you look at the product and it's like, oh, that is cumbersome. How do you retain simplicity with time?
I mean, this is really where I think there's a lot of art involved. You have to think through the right level of abstraction with features. You don't want to open up an app and see hundreds of toggles and different settings and different switches. It's just overwhelming and confusing and hard to understand. You do want to make some of those settings and toggles available for a power user, someone who really wants to push your product to its limit. So it's figuring out from a design perspective what the information architecture should look like, how to tweak the interface to be approachable for a layperson, but to have depth for a more power user, if that makes sense.
I totally get you. How do you strike that balance though?
Through a lot of iteration, experimentation, coming up with literally hundreds or thousands of different mock-ups and designs I'm a huge fan of rapid prototyping, like not just creating interactive Figma mock-ups that you can click on, but literal prototyping with real software code so that you can just rapidly experiment and feel out using your intuition and your instinct and do user studies and all that kind of stuff to figure out if it's approachable for a layperson.
I was speaking to, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but Pani before the show.
Pani, yes.
Pani, yeah. So I was chatting to him before, and he said to me about a time when the team wanted to ship a product, when it was a little bit, a little bit creaky. And you were like, no. Just no, guys, not going to happen. Can you talk to me? How do you think about speed of execution, and is good today better than perfect tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I can be sometimes known to be a stickler for design details. And I guess where that comes from is when you're working with a product team in pursuit of a vision, you want to put a product out there that, or at least in my experience, you want to put a product out there that you can be really proud of. And I think first impressions really matter, whether it's the first impression for your target customer or for reporters out there, whoever it is. I've always felt that when you're launching something brand new, it can't be perfect. Perfection it just takes forever, and you might not actually, if you try to build perfection, you launch it after taking years, then you might find out that it actually isn't solving a real user need, and then you might have to start all over. But you at least should launch something that you're really proud of, that reflects, it's emblematic of the vision that you're trying to achieve.
Does that go against rapid prototyping? If you think about something you're really proud of, rapid prototypes are like, hey, quick and dirty, does this work? Does this work? Do you like it here? Do you like it here? Do they not go against each other?
I actually think that rapid prototyping is a critical tool for any product person to accelerate the path towards putting something out onto the market that they're proud of, because it basically allows really rapid iteration and guidance by your intuition and instinct within your own internal team, within the people who all share a vision of what you're trying to achieve. And it also allows you to do sort of informal user testing. You just hand your rapid prototype, you hand your phone to a friend or a target customer and see what they think. So I think it's actually quite complementary to the idea of getting a product that you're proud of out there.
Okay, so we see what they think, and then we have a product review. And again, I'm not in the product world, and a lot of CEOs aren't, and so I want this to be like for lessons for them. When we think about product reviews, how do you do them? What makes a good versus a great one?
I have a few different types of reviews, and I don't know if you sort of bucket this under a product review, but I think the environment for a brainstorm is also extremely important. But for a product review, I mean,
let's start there. And brainstorm, are we in person or remote? Do we have a whiteboard? Do we have a mirror board?
I think a mirror board. I don't even know what that is. That sounds amazing.
You know Miro, the collaboration tool?
Oh, really? No, I haven't seen that. Or maybe I have, but I haven't seen the name.
It's like for designers and product people to design around.
Oh, gotcha. All right. You learn something new every day. I love it. I'll have to check that out. I guess I'm old-fashioned. I like a whiteboard. I think that when it comes to creative brainstorming and design brainstorming, being in person is just of paramount importance. I think your physical setup actually is extremely important. I like to try to create a relaxed atmosphere where you're sort of on a couch, where you can be casual and conversational. And I like to create a safe space where you sort of have psychological safety to throw out some crazy ideas. Because I've often found that wacky ideas that are sort of almost like half jokes can actually have a really important edge to them that can, at the end of the day, turn into a really amazing idea, product, feature.
Do you cap it at a certain number of people? How do you determine who to invite? I'm just intrigued to really get to grips with kind of the bare bones.
It's actually really important to have a small group of people, because otherwise you just get into these situations where there's too many cooks in a kitchen and there's too many people that can sort of shoot down ideas, which I think is the worst thing when it comes to creativity. I mean, it could just, shooting down ideas is something that I just really try to avoid in the sort of like product culture that I create, because any idea can have merit if you look at it under a certain lens. But yeah, I try to cap it to maybe like 5 people max. I mean, there's like a rough rule of thumb, but I think it's really important. It's like people that you trust, you know the way their minds work. You're all coming at a problem from a different perspective. Maybe someone's formally trained in product design, or maybe someone is an engineer, and you can think about it from those different lenses.
Do you set an agenda beforehand?
I think I have in the past. I think setting an agenda can be important, but sometimes if you add too much structure, it can stifle creativity. It's like this constant tension or this like struggle that I face internally, where I think some of the most creative ideas can arise from chaotic environments, but you also have to like have some level of structure to sort of keep people on task, if that makes sense.
How do you bring chaos to environments? Like I'm a rebel rule breaker. That's why, again, never went to college. Mother still thinks I'm, dealing something on the internet. When I rock up with Chanel and she still doesn't know what I do. The fund helps, I have to admit now.
I'm sure.
She says to everyone that I'm a hedge fund manager. So, not quite mum, but, with
close
that.
enough.
Yeah. But like, how do you bring chaos? How do you inspire creativity? How you let's actually fucking think outside the box here?
2 things come to mind for me. I think one, just bringing together people from diverse backgrounds and perspectives. I just can't underscore enough how important that is, so that you have people thinking about the same problem, that same human need that you're trying to solve from a totally different perspective. Like I said, whether it's engineering or someone who's trained in fine art or graphic design or fashion design or architecture, whatever it is, like bringing these different perspectives together can help you analyze a problem in a different way. And the other thing that I think is really important is inspiration. Traveling around the world and seeing your target customer, for example, in the flesh, and observing the way that they're interacting with the world and understanding their environments in a really nuanced way. I think getting the right sort of creative inspiration is paramount towards generating that chaos and coming up with the right ideas.
You know what's really hard though, Will? It's really hard when you're the product leader and you've got revenue generation today and innovation for tomorrow. How do you think about balancing investing in what makes money today and making sure that machine hums, but also being sure that you have an eye on generative AI and new ways of creating profiles that's seamless and easy and you don't need to do anything, or whatever that may be? How do you balance the two, revenue generation and an eye to the future?
I mean, you need both. You just need both, because obviously you need revenue to support the business, but you also need to be innovating and pushing your product forward to stay ahead of the competition. I have found that the best approach, or at least what's worked in my experience, is having two separate teams dedicated towards each of those two independent goals. So one team dedicated towards revenue generation, another team generated towards innovation, because oftentimes there's a really strong tension between those two when you're building a product. You might have to deteriorate your revenues, with a new feature in order to experiment with some really innovative new idea. And if it's the same team making those decisions, that conflict of incentives can be paralyzing for development, if that makes sense.
It totally does. Do they need to work together, those separate teams, or are they quite clearly distinct and different?
They definitely have to work together. So I think that, that's sort of like part of the role of a product leader, is to be able to properly balance between the needs of those two teams. It's creating the right communication pathways, the right processes for those teams to collaborate with each other and share notes and ideas. Think about how to build a culture of openness and information sharing, and one where people from those two different teams can actually get to know each other personally, so they can build trust with each other as humans, so that they're not just thinking about, the sort of like opposing ideas and directions that they have.
What are the mistakes that product teams get when it comes to culture? How does product culture go bad?
I like to create a culture where everyone is growth-minded, where everyone practices humility, empathy, and listening to one another. But what I personally don't like is when you've got folks that are very egocentric, really ego-driven, people who think that they know everything, because that can be poisonous to your team culture. It can stifle the voices of other people in the room, and it can plant these seeds in the team that over time, can tarnish, the rest of what you're doing. I think a lot about team culture and how every single person is like a seed in your team, and those seeds over time blossom into trees. And I guess your team is like a field of trees. But if you've got the wrong people on the team, it can be like I don't know what the right analogy is here. It could be like a parasite or something like that can grow over time. So you have to get rid of it really quickly.
What a wonderful floral analogy, and I'm glad you're taking on Attenborough for the natural analogy.
If product doesn't work out, then who knows?
You know what? You need to change the voice a little bit. He's got the soft tones than you do. I totally agree with you on the importance of that culture, but that comes down to you and your hiring, actually, and getting the right people on board. Is really hard to hire great product people. You've done it at Snap very well. You're doing it again at Match now very well. My question to you is, first off, before we talk about the people, how do you structure hiring for product? What does that process look like? Again, I'm an angel investment of yours. I've never done it before. How do I hire product people?
I specifically look at products that people have designed or built in the past. So I think that someone's actual work, the products that they've created, or at least that they've imagined, speaks volumes, more than you can possibly extract out of like a few interviews. I think it speaks volumes to the way that they think, the way that they communicate their ideas.
What do you want to see in the products that they've built?
I guess it depends on the product, but I think of so when I was first building Snap Games, actually this goes back to the Australia comment that you made earlier. I had this kind of crazy vision of creating these multiplayer games in Snapchat that were fun and vibrant and colorful and featured your Bitmoji, so you could play as your Bitmoji in Snapchat with your friends. Snap didn't have game development expertise already within the company, so I started looking for game studios out there in the world that we could potentially acquire through M&A to sort of bring that expertise into the company. And I found a game that just really spoke to me. It was multiplayer, real-time multiplayer. It was super fun and colorful. I remember like the music had the right energy that I was looking for, and then
Was this
everything
was this Fruit Ninja?
It was the same creators, actually. The game was actually called Crash Club. I don't think it's actually on the App Store anymore, and like the user interface of the game menus was like this 3D box that you would like swipe and tap on, and like the box would spin around in 3D. It was a very sort of like novel approach to thinking about UI interaction design. And before I had even met the developers behind the game, I was like, this is the game studio that we need to acquire. So then actually I found a way to get connected to them, and we had an intro call. In that intro call, all I was looking for, like I was already sold on their product abilities, on their game creating abilities, but all I was really looking for was whether it was a good culture fit, whether we got along, whether they had personalities that I thought that I would like to work with over time. And literally, like, we had one call. They were in Australia. I was in LA. I confirmed my suspicion, and I immediately flew over to them like the next day to Brisbane, Australia, to pitch them on essentially Snap buying their game studio. And we made it happen incredibly quickly. So it depends what product, getting back to your question, it depends what product you're trying to build. But I think if you have a certain vision in mind for the kind of product that you want to create, then you'll see the right person. You'll know it when you see it, when you see what they've done in the past.
Can I ask, what are the single best qualities you look for in a product designer? You mentioned there the design of the 3D shapes and spinning. What are the best qualities of those product designers?
Whether it's a designer or an engineer or a product manager, I'm looking for people who are very growth minded. I mean, I think just inherently when you're trying to push the envelope with product innovation.
What does that mean? Like, they're very growth minded. Sorry, I'm pushing you on that.
Like someone who is open to change and adaptation and learning. Someone who has the innate intellectual curiosity to understand the way the world works or to improve their abilities.
Okay, how do you test that in an interview?
Actually, when I hire anyone, I'm always asking what their long-term career ambitions are, so I can understand how much thought they've put into what their end state, what their end game really looks like. And I want to make sure that that end game is at least something that I can support and sort of take them, hopefully help to push them along that journey over time.
What do you not want to hear in that 10-year plan? I will be like, oh, I don't want that.
I believe in striking work-life balance, but I think at the end of the day, I'm looking for someone who's just really passionate about their craft and whatever it is that they're doing, because I think that passion is what drives people to work beyond 9 to 5. It's like you have to understand people's motivation. It's like, why are they interviewing with you? What are their career ambitions? What are they looking for?
What do you think product people care about today? I think people's shift has been very real. People care less about money than ever before. Mission, yeah, they say they do more because they think it's more moral. But they actually do care about the work-life balance, I find, much more than anything.
I mean, I do think that the pandemic really helped people to realize that maybe you don't need to be in the office 5 days a week or maybe even worse, 7 days a week. I think having some level of flexibility is conducive of having a little bit better work-life balance, and maybe even being a better teammate, being a better employee, because you can bring your full self to work under the right circumstances. I don't know if people aren't looking for money. I mean, this is one of the things that concerns me actually about product management as a discipline today. I feel like it's this sexy, trendy job in tech that has an allure because, it's known to sometimes be high paying. And I guess it's like I try to weed out people who might only be interested in product management because of reasons like that.
Like cash.
Yeah. I mean, obviously at the end of the day,
dude,
like,
you're speaking to a venture investor. Like, mine's a sexier job, I think, than PMing. And we get paid, I don't know, actually, like, PMs get paid pretty well, I think, right?
they do, at least, in certain companies where it's a highly valued function.
I mean, it's a cool thing. You're CEO of the product. Like, that's kind of how most people describe it. That's kind of cool. Can I ask, on like case studies in the interview process, do you do case studies? If so, how do you think about doing them?
I don't, personally. I mean, I've always just felt that it's a little bit too artificial and forced, and it's like kind of like, I mean, I was never I think of a case study almost like a standardized test. The classic brain teasers that some of these big tech companies, I don't know if they still do it, but at least, when I was going through college and sort of studying for my internship interviews and all that kind of stuff, it was all about these brain teasers. I don't know. It's like a certain type of test of someone's thinking, but if they're not good at brain teasers, they can still be good at a lot of other things. So I don't really take a very structured approach when it comes to my interviews with case studies or brain teasers or anything like that.
Do you know pretty quickly when someone's good, do you think?
I do. I think I do. I would like to think so. And actually one of the key, I mean, honestly, I look at what they've done. I look at what they've built, even if they're really early in their career, looking at concepts that they've created and asking them about those concepts, asking them, oh, like, why did you put this button here? Or why did you use this specific copy, this specific string of text in the user interface here? To get an understanding of how they think, to get an understanding of how passionate they are about product.
What's been your biggest hiring mistakes? So like two for me. One is when they come from great brand and I'm like, they came from, Jack's product team at Snap. Obviously not this, but like, they must be amazing. And they're like, nah, not really. Or like I go, amazing product. They're so innovative. And then they're just like not a good culture fit. And I didn't take that into account. What have been your biggest mistakes product hiring wise? For
me personally, I mean, I think that I can get overly invested in people. I can give people a lot of room to fail because I like to see the best in people, I guess. I'm like a glass half full kind of guy. And my friends always actually give me a hard time about this because I tend to like everyone. Even people who most people severely dislike, I love them because I just like see them for who they are and I think they bring something special to the world. But I think that does make it so that sometimes I give people a long leash and, I may need to sort of like read the signs from the team earlier to figure out that maybe they aren't a great culture fit, or maybe they're just in this for the money and not that passionate about our mission.
Is it wrong to be just in it for the money? I oscillate on this one. Like I know founders that have created like decacorns and they're just there for the cash. But does that matter? Does it matter? I guess the product people, does it matter if like, yeah, I'm here for the money that you're paying me, but I'm really, really good at what I do?
I think it matters. I do not like the idea of like a paid mercenary who's just in this for the money because, product can be a high earning job. I think that the most profound and innovative products come from a deep passion for creating something that can have an impact. And like,
do you like people who've had experience in that space before?
Not necessarily. No, I think it's really oftentimes valuable to bring in folks from a different perspective, to think through from a first principles point of view, or, by leaning on the expertise, that unique perspective that they have, how to create a certain type of product or feature.
I totally agree. I think actually that it's very beneficial, especially like gaming in particular. I love hiring people from gaming to non-gaming products.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. This is what I'm saying. It's like when I got to know the game development community, I encountered some of the most brilliant product thinkers in the world, and I just had no idea.
No, I totally agree with you. Listen, I want to talk about the future, and then we're going to do quick fire because I've roamed around here. We have to talk about kind of the impact of AI. First, impact of AI on product design. How does AI change the actual process of product creation and design, do you think?
First of all, as a product designer or product manager, I think AI has already created a bunch of tools that we can use to be super product designers or product managers. I mean, thinking through like, I have already some product designers on my team who are using tools like Midjourney or Dolly to come up with different UI concepts or visual concepts. I actually think I was experimenting with these large, I guess they're called LMMs, these large multimodal models that are both like they can talk with like language, like a chat GPT, but they can also see. They can see imagery and photos and analyze and understand them. And I think there's probably going to be an AI tool in the near future that gives you instantaneous user feedback and testing. Like you create a mock-up or a prototype and you hand it to the AI and you say, hey, AI, give me feedback on this new experience as if you were a 18-year-old male living in Los Angeles, or as if you were a 55-year-old woman living in New York. And I've already actually started like playing with some of these LMMs in this way. And I think it's definitely just right around the corner. So I think like making sure that you understand how to utilize these latest AI tools is probably really important towards making sure you've got the right tools at your disposal to do a good job. And then obviously when it comes to product design, I think understanding the capabilities of AI. I mean, I think AI is going to completely change every facet of life as we know it, essentially, over the next few years. And therefore, I think it's really important to understand the capabilities and limitations of the technology and figure out how to gracefully weave that into your product design so that you can stay relevant.
So I've had many people on the show say that in the world of AI being kind of center stage and the impact it has on product, UI will really be completely irrelevant and it'll be BS. Do you agree with that statement, or do you think that's overly simplistic?
I do not agree with that at all. I mean, AI is an overloaded term. I think these days, right now in this moment, when we think of AI, a lot of people are talking about large language models like ChatGPT. And what I think is so amazing about ChatGPT is that it opens up an entirely new paradigm of human-computer interaction where we theoretically no longer have to interact with computers through user interfaces and buttons, but we can just talk to computers. It's actually really powerful because I think about my mom, for example. She's in her mid-70s and she didn't grow up with mobile phones and understanding how to use and navigate mobile interaction and user interface paradigms. She's not that good at using apps on her iPhone, but she's really good at talking. So it's incredible to me how something like ChatGPT can enable an entirely new mode of interaction with computers. But I don't think that the previous human-computer interaction paradigms are going away. For instance, look at like the command line interface. That was one of the original ways to interact with computers. Like people are still using command line interfaces today. And then the graphical user interface, on a PC, on a desktop, even though we have these incredible multi-touch user interfaces on our phones today, people are still using graphical user interfaces on their PCs. They're still using command line interfaces. And in a similar vein, I think people will continue to use user interfaces on a screen, on a laptop, or on a phone, even in a world where talking to a computer through a large language model is pervasive.
Listen, I totally agree with you. I can't wait for my mother to actually be able to use a piece of technology at all. She still calls it goggle. And so, it'll be a relief if she can talk to her phone and give me a break. Trust me, Will, I am all for it.
It's going to be incredible.
My question to you, generative AI. I'm a venture investor. We love a bit of generative AI, Will. Is it worth the hype?
I do think the hype is warranted, but I'll caveat by saying I wouldn't just invest in every single generative AI-based company that comes across my radar. I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs right now who have a great idea maybe for how to apply something like ChatGPT to a new application. But if they're essentially just prompt engineering on top of the same large language model that everyone else has access to, then I worry about their long-term defensibility. But fundamentally, I do think that the hype around generative AI is warranted. I think, going back to that shift in human-computer interaction paradigms, or that evolution, it just allows us to interact with computers in an entirely new way. And on top of that, the fact that these large language models are trained on like all of the world's information and data, it's just incredible. It's like, it's true intelligence. It's democratizing access to intelligence over time, especially as the cost of accessing these and the cost of the inference gets cheaper. These AIs can actually reason across multiple domains, whether it's human history or science or medicine. It's just incredible to be able to have this intelligent system at your fingertips that can access like all of humanity's knowledge. It's incredible.
Well, if you think about Match,
Yeah.
so like unlike Snap, where like great champion users use Snap more, if you have a really successful Match user, they're like, thank you for finding me the love of my life. I'm off now.
No, I think it's beautiful. I mean, this is what wakes me up every day, to be honest. It's just thinking about the impact that we can have at a global scale on real people around the world. I mean, it is a major success for us if we never see someone again because they found a relationship that they're happy with for the rest of their lives. I think it's amazing. It's a little strange. It's something that I'm still getting used to, because if we're successful, then we lose users. But then I think a lot of our job comes down to making sure that we can always capture the next generation of users. You know, those people who are just coming of age to think about dating and sparking romantic connection.
Dating apps are even competitive. And what I mean by that is like, you know, people have 4, people have 5, you know. Back when I had dating apps when I was single, Will,
Okay.
you would have 5. And it wasn't like you would just do it to be as successful as possible. Do you know what I mean? Like, are you actually competing?
I actually think about it more as collaborating, frankly, it's like partnering up with other apps and other brands, you know, many of which are actually within the Match Group portfolio.
But I'd say your competition are games. Sorry, this sounds awful. Where do you go on dating apps mostly? Mostly when you're on the loo. When you're on public transport in the UK, like we have trains, buses, you know, but whatever that is, or in Ubers, I would say it's not like dating apps. You're competing against other casual games.
I think everyone has there's only 24 hours in a day, and you know, there's only X amount of those hours that you're going to be glued to your mobile phone. Hopefully people are not always glued to their mobile phone and they're out there in the real world interacting with people in real life. So yeah, I mean, I think you're competing for time, your sort of share of mind for people, whether it's, you know, gaming or TikTok or whatever it is. I mean, at the end of the day, there's just a finite amount of time in the day. And I think, you know, at some level, every single mobile app has this issue.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I would say we're competing against Taylor Swift, which makes me terrified. Terrified. You would choose Taylor every day over me.
Formidable competitor.
Formidable. What the? Listen, I want to move into a quick fire round, Will. So
Okay,
I
let's
see
do
a
it.
short statement. So tell me, when do you listen to users and when do you ignore them and go, you know what? Product roadmap. We're going to stick to what we know.
I think listening to users is normally extremely important. Though I think the one exception might be when something that users are asking for conflicts with one of your core product values. But then I still think you don't like ignore them, but I think it's just about like listening and understanding what they want and figuring out how to maybe solve that problem that they're having in a way that's adherent to your values.
What's your work from home setup? I was told that you have some special work from home setup. Hit me. Wisdom.
I did go a little crazy about this over the pandemic. I've got an Apple Pro Display XDR. I've iterated on a few cameras, but at this point I've got something called an Insta360 Link, which is just an incredible webcam on a gimbal. It's amazing. I've got a custom keyboard. I'm a huge nerd. I mean, you know, think about me growing up on IRC. I've got what's called a Leopold FC660C keyboard with Japanese Topre switches in a custom housing made by someone named Ryan Norbauer, who's like an artisan keyboard case maker in Los Angeles. What else? Oh, I got a Logitech MX Master 3 mouse. I swear by that mouse. I don't know. I could do like an entire podcast on my work from home setup.
No, you're a totally normal guy. Don't worry, Will.
Totally normal.
You just, you know, yeah, destroyed all street cred.
Oops. Yep.
Can I ask, what would you say is the biggest mistake founders make when hiring product teams?
Not getting rid of poor culture fits fast enough.
What's the first sign?
I think it can be a lot of different signs, but it's like you see the way that they're treating another coworker, if they're not kind, if they've got an ego and they think that they know it all. I think these are the things that can be deteriorating to your culture that you're trying to build over time.
What one piece of advice would you give to a product leader starting a new role first thing tomorrow?
Just get reps in building products, no matter what it is. Just build anything, even if it's a personal project on the side, because I think getting those reps in is really important. embrace imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a good thing because it means you're growing.
What's the watch collection?
I want to hear about your watch collection now. I have been obsessed with watches since I was like a little kid. Literally, I mean, I've got like a drawer full of all the watches I've ever owned in my life. My old G-Shock, my Nike watch, swatches growing up. More recently, I've been exploring all different types of brands, and I just love watches. It's like this like amazing blend of art and science and technology. I love how it's like a form of self-expression. I love how they're sort of anachronistic nowadays, you know, at a time where we're just surrounded by digital computers. Having a mechanical watch that's got this heartbeat of its own, that sort of like, as long as like you're wearing it, its heartbeat is like in unison beating with your heartbeat. I just think it's incredible.
I totally agree with you, especially in terms of the heartbeat. I also think in terms of marketing, like, you know, the Patek marketing of, you know, being for generations.
Absolutely.
I think is fascinating. And actually how different social capital accrues to the different styles. And like what you wear is who you are in some respects. Do you know what I mean?
I 100% know what you mean. Every single day I look at my watches and I'm like, who do I want to be today? It's an incredible form of self-expression. And I also, like, to your point, I mean, I'm a big fan. I guess I'm a sentimental guy, but I love how you can get a watch to celebrate or commemorate a certain milestone in life. And it's like, for the rest of your life, whenever you wear that watch, you get nostalgic about that milestone. I just think it's really important what watches can symbolize.
Yeah, I mean, we could change it to a Patek. It's not for life, it's for your birthday. That'd be amazing. Great. Yeah. Sadly, no mother or girlfriend has ever done that for me. But listen, final one. What recent company product strategy have you been most impressed by? What have you seen another company do and you're like, smart?
Okay, I have to give a shameless plug for one of our own companies, Tinder. They have been working on this new AI feature that allows users to very quickly surface the best photos from their camera roll, all using AI in a privacy safe way. And I remember, like, when I first signed up for Tinder
years ago. How do you do that? Surely that's subjective.
It is possible to create a model, an AI model, that can predict which photos that already exist on your phone will best perform on Tinder, because you've trained that model on highly performing photos on Tinder.
Yeah, that's pretty good. This is like the best girlfriend you could ever.
I think it's gonna. I think it solves. I hope. I'm optimistic that it can really solve a huge user problem that I felt when I first signed up for Tinder years ago. It's like, I don't know how to choose the best photos of myself. I hate photos of myself. I don't like looking at photos of myself. So it took me weeks to figure out the right photos to put on my profile when I first made one. But being able to do that almost instantaneously, I think, can be a real friction remover.
No, I totally agree with you. I love that as an example. And my word, that is one hell of a model that can predict the most high converting pictures. Well, I've loved this. As I said, I heard so many great things from Jack. I wanted to do it for a long time. Thank you so much for putting up with my wayward questions.
Thanks so much, Harry. It's been a pleasure.